Welcome, everyone. My name is Seema. I'm from the Cleveland Museum of Art, and I am happy to say I am not talking about Gallery 1. So if you think that's what I'm talking about, feel free to get up and walk out. I will not feel bad. But instead, I'm talking about Vine, which all of the four of us have used, and you will hopefully use today. If you would like to, in the first half hour, less than half an hour, we're going to tell you some of our experiences. In the second half an hour, you're going to have your own experiences. So this is your chance to take out your phone if you haven't already done it and download Vine. After which we will be breaking up. We're going to have 4 stations for you to try. Those of you who sat through the prototyping before this, I can tell that you're already game, so this will be equally fun. And the 4 of us will lead different sessions, and you can go between the 4 of them. So that's sort of my beginning, and I'm going to pass it over to each of my colleagues. First, Alli, who's going to tell you a little bit about herself, and then start presenting. That's a good question.
Okay, you can all hear me? Okay, hi. My name's Alli. I'm from Australia. I have worked with a number of museums in Sydney until the beginning of last year, 2013, when I quit my job, packed up all my stuff, and travelled around the world for 12 months. I visited 205 museums in the course of 12 months. And some of these vines at the start are just the various types of transport I recorded on Vine as I went. So, air travel, rickety boats in Slovenia, camels in Morocco, and on salt lakes in Chile. So, a month before I left, the Vine app came out, and I was drawn to it because I needed some way to communicate with more than an image. And so for those who don't know, Vine allows you to record 6 seconds only, and touch is critical. So it's the thumb or the finger on the screen of the iPhone and immediately starts to record. So that's you can intuit when to record according to where your body is, where you are in space, and that really worked for me. I find that also Vine has, because of its short space, it has the capacity to compress, condense, and then concentrate and intensify a moment. So you don't have to necessarily record a very long YouTube clip. This has the capacity to get at what I needed to communicate. So before I started really launching into Vine, about a month after I departed, I was looking at other users of Vine, which is a tip, to see the techniques they used and trying to replicate it. So this one's actually replicating just a little trick used by an artist, Man Bartlett, and I recreated that as I went along as well. So I took tricks and techniques that other Viners used and brought that into how I use the app. Okay, so the first museum Vine I have is one that I often use the app to create or to capture a sense of movement in the gallery, or to create a sense of movement if there isn't one, but also to allude at a sense of story or narrative. And another one is the 360 pan around a space if you're inside an immersive space or a room. The trick is, or the tendency is to always trying to get a quick loop that seamlessly keeps running around. It doesn't always have to be like that. They can work even if they don't loop seamlessly. Or 360 around a sculpture. Again, the tendency is to try to get it to loop seamlessly, but it doesn't always. But I don't think that reduces their effectiveness. It was in Naples. Another, as I talked about before, using the touch to intuit where your body is in a space and capture that sense of movement through the museum. This was an example of doing something pretty silly for the efforts of getting a vine. My shoes were really squeaky, so I was wandering around barefoot in an effort to capture, with a decent soundtrack, that process of going from the macro looking in the museum down to the object level, the micro level of looking, within 6 seconds. And this is the same kind of thing, but with one piece of artwork, which we all tend to do in a museum: stand back and then go forward, look at the detail and move back. Okay, this is suggestive of an activity we're doing later on, just a pastiche of faces, matching up a feature on the face as best you can between each frame and just letting it roll. So that was in the Vatican museums. So the next one is the product of one of my most interesting experiences on Vine last year. Chad Weinard from the North Carolina Museum of Art reached out to me on Twitter while I was in Rome and asked if I would recreate in Vine a particular photographic work by Robert Rauschenberg, which is 5 photographs of Cy Twombly progressing downstairs. So at the time, the work is called Cy and the Roman Steps, and at the time we believed it was originally created on the Spanish Steps. So my partner and I raced out at 6 a.m, tried to create the vine, and found that it wasn't working, the space wasn't right. And I didn't realise until I looked through Vine and looked through the camera and tried to recreate it and examined closely the original on my phone and was looking through my partner's phone through Vine, realising this was not right. And it wasn't until I looked in that manner that I realised. So there ensued the effort to find where the work really was created. Chad, I know, was reaching out to people he knew, academics who might know the answer to this question we had, and meanwhile I was trying to get at paywalled scholarly articles and combing them for the clue that we needed. It came to the end of my stay, and I found the evening before a very early train the answer that we needed. So we had to cancel trains, rebook journeys, so that the next morning we could run out at 6 a.m. and on the correct stairs recreate it. And we were successful. And of course, by looking into the work that much, it inspired me, began to understand more of what Rauschenberg was interested in, and I began to look at steps very in depth. And I saw them as this wonderful stage. And so I was drawn to stairs across the world after that and recreated Rauschenberg's work again and again and again. So this is one on the stairs of a mosque in Casablanca in Morocco. And we got really playful, really spontaneous, really quick. Some stairs in Valparaiso in Chile. And finally, some Incan stairs, the ruins of an Incan sun temple in Peru. So on that note, I'll hand over to Chad, who will be able to tell you his side of that story.
Thank you so much, Alli. This was an amazing experience from a museum standpoint, and I want to tell you a little bit about how a museum can use Vine, but I certainly want to start with this project. The backstory at the North Carolina Museum of Art was, at the time, we were hosting an exhibition on contemporary art and time, and so we had time on the brain. I had been interested in Rauschenberg for my own academic studies. Part of this story is a story of collaborations and a story of connections. So for me to be able to, in the middle of a contemporary art exhibition, think about Rauschenberg and his work dealing with time, pick a piece from the SF MoMA collection online, connect with someone around the world who I knew was traveling and doing art on Vine, ask her to take part in this experiment and create really works of art based on an exhibition that we were doing was really formative for our social media efforts. This kind of mix of connection and collaboration and real-time looking through a lens of art history to see an art process and an art idea from 50 years ago, 1952, reenacted, updated with a current technology, and then extended throughout Europe and really seen through an artist's eyes is something that is almost a dream situation for us in the galleries. We want to create a creative space of people inspired by the art and the art history that we have on view. And so this really inspired us in many ways to first of all, see how a visitor might come to our collection, go through our spaces, and react to them in the same way that Alli did. So let me show you a few examples of how, as a museum, we have approached Vine as well. This was part of at the same time. So we had a contemporary exhibition about time. We sent out a call on Twitter and Facebook that said, please send us your vines about time. That call went out to Alli. She responded in a beautiful way. We got about a dozen responses. This is also one of them, a painting that transitions through the day, literally painting time through time. Very elaborate. There was a blog post written by this artist about being inspired by the process and being inspired by the medium. And in fact, the blog post goes into the contraptions that she made to actually get this picture made and converted to video on Vine. This is the title wall for the exhibition. It's called 0 to 60, Contemporary Art About Time. I should say that as a marketing effort, that contest, that call for entries was not successful in and of itself. We got about 24 entries of the highest quality I've ever seen in a competition. From a quantitative standpoint and a marketing standpoint, not successful. From a qualitative standpoint, very successful. And from a PR standpoint, we had several TV stations pick up the story and run with it. So overall, a fun experiment. This is another shot. This is in the galleries. The exhibition included this Jennifer Steinkamp piece, which is Orbit. So a museum can use Vine to give a sense of works of art in the gallery, especially works of art that involve movement, that involve video, that sort of thing. This is the sort of thing that you simply can't get across in still photos. Also behind the scenes work. So this is every season or so we change the Torah scroll that's in our Judaic gallery. This is a 6-second video of that process. Very quick. It's something that shows up in line on our Twitter feed, so it's immediately visible, and it gives you a sense of what's going on while the museum's closed. This is another one, and I wonder if I can turn the sound on.
You just said you were done now.
Where is it? Oh, yeah. This is very funny. We have a wonderful Judaic collection. And this is a curator in his office winning a Sotheby's auction item. Very happy, very thrilled. Fun to catch this kind of behind-the-scenes action. We actually got some good response from the funder, the benefactor, who helped us buy the item as well. And we'll see him again and again and again. It's a fascinating tool for honing in on stories within paintings. This is Bottoni, Triumph of Venice, and it gives you an opportunity to hone in on details in paintings and structure them in a certain way.
Have you ever guys made guess what painting it is?
Yes. Doesn't always work out, but it's always interesting. This is another multimedia piece that involves motion again, something you could not capture. It's Michael Rovner, Tefillah. This is Raphael Lozano Hemmer, the Year's Midnight, which we get a lot of visitor interaction with. And so visitors will post Vines and Instagrams. We have a Pinterest board just of interactions with this piece. And it's made for Vine. Mm-hmm. This kid is adorable.
He really is.
So smoke comes out of there's a motion sensor. It can tell where your eyes are, and after a couple seconds, smoke will appear out of your eyes. 3D sculpture. So this is a Bertos piece in our galleries, and it gives you a sense of not only the 3D structure, but also the galleries. Close-up view. So we want to also model how we're looking at paintings. As Alli said, we're moving in, we're moving out. Sometimes, this is Claude Monet's Waves at the Manaport. Here we're giving a sense of the texture of a painting. This is a visitor vine. We have a 3D work hanging from the ceiling in our East Building, Helmick and Schechter Rabble, and this is a great view of that piece. And so on Vine, you can take a visitor's post and revine it just like on Twitter, and share things that way. And that's all for me.
So part of my role at the museum is to oversee intergenerational learning, which is a really broad kind of program. It's a real catch-all for all kinds of people who learn by doing, and doing is, again, a very broad sort of category. And that does include all of the content for Gallery 1, but it also includes 18-month-olds who paint in our galleries. And my staff does really amazing work, and sometimes that work is hard for people to perceive. So one of the things that I think of when I think of interpretation, which is what really our work is, it's about sharing and listening. And so Vine helps us do that in many different ways. So the first one I'm showing you is a process video. We had a very exciting thing, which is that we have a Van Gogh exhibition right now. The thing that's very challenging about the exhibition is that it's got a very small footprint. And so it's paired with a Japanese exhibit, and we were trying to get our families to be excited about both of them. The Japanese exhibit is 20th century Japanese art, so it doesn't fit people's paradigms. And so we used Vine, or I used Vine. People said, well, what are you making at Family Day? And so I made this very simple Vine that shows you the project, and it's Japanese carp kites. The thing about process videos is, give me a second, the reason that we got really excited at Vine in our department is that there's something really magic about it. I don't know, those of you, I was going to have a show of hands, but maybe I'll do it now. How many people have made a Vine? Excellent. How many people have watched a Vine? How many people came into this room and thought I was going to talk about wine? No, okay, good. So good. Most of us have made them, and I actually think that in talking to our users, many of them have watched them but have not made them. And I have found myself, and now I will not make you raise your hand, but I have done this in my office where I've lost count at how many times I've watched it cycle through. Because there's something really magical about it. And a lot of very good ones have this sort of sense of humor. I particularly love Vines where the hand is invisible, the maker is not there. But there's something really magical about it, and my colleague Patty, who will talk a little bit more, can tell you about how sort of the process, some of the process things later in the workshop part of this. But a lot of what's going on is there's a lot of work that goes behind that kind of magic. This was a whole day of work. My husband is barely seen in this, but he really deserves a shout out because he actually did the work while I did the video. And we took all of the projects that had been left on a family day, all of the papers that nobody took home, and we turned them into just a few sheets of paper. And I brought some for crafting later. But in thinking about it, what you need to think about when you make process videos or make anything that takes a lot of time and compresses it into 6 seconds, the thing you have to do is try to edit. It's really hard, but it's a wonderful practice for museums. Because we're often prone to be hyperbolic, to share too much. We're so open arms. That's overwhelming to people. And Vine is a wonderful tool for you as practitioners of whatever interpretation you do. And even if you're on the back end of something, you're still part of interpretation if you work in a museum. And it's a way for you to edit that. I have to load more. So we'll tell you a little bit more about some of our tips later, and Patty and I have made some terrible vines to help you make some good vines. But one of the thing I cannot stress enough is to use the ghost feature. So you can see my meta vine. I really thought it out. I used an tripod, which is essential. The shake, I get motion sickness. I can't watch any vine that has a shake. We use the ghosting feature, which you can sort of see here. This is actually Patty's vine of my hands making a little thing in my dirty office. We also often shoot more than we need. There's a wonderful edit feature. Edit, edit, edit. The feature is there so that you can do what you actually should be doing in your practice anyway. Being thoughtful and editing and taking things out. The other thing about Vine is it allows you to share ideas that are very complicated in a pretty quick time. So you have to really think it out. And let me turn on the sound. Okay. It is. I don't know how to make this louder.
Tea from the caddy goes into the pot. Pour through the strainer into the cup. Hot water from the urn. Tea from the caddy goes into the pot. Pour through the strainer into the cup.
We could listen to that all day, right? But the thing was that we have this space that looks sort of like a walk-through space, and there's all these pieces of stuff. And now this is actually Patty's field, so I don't want to be too disparaging, but it's stuff that most visitors would not be able to make sense of. And so we tried to figure out a very quick way for them to make sense of it. So we tried to create a narrative out of it in 6 seconds, which actually took at least a couple takes. And so then we deleted them. And that's the thing. If it's only 6 seconds, you can actually waste that amount of time. In some ways, I was just in the rapid prototyping session. You're sort of prototyping by trying them out and then throwing them away and trying another one. And I won't show you this one, but another thing that Vine has done really well for us is that we have thought about looking at our art. It's sort of silly. As educators, we should think about looking at our art all the time, but we don't. And so it's made us really be conscious about looking at our art literally from all around. Finally, Vine has been really helpful for us in telling stories about ourselves and with our visitors. So this is a program, I think I'm going to have to turn on sound again. Hold on.
4.
So we have a group of preschool teachers who have worked with our institution for quite a long time. They are not art makers, and sometimes the things we ask them to do are scary. So Vine has a great sense of bringing people out and having a sense of humor, and then also feeling like something that isn't that big a deal. It's not, you're just using your phone, there's no big camera, it's not scary. And so we use it to help us document the things our teachers do and help them participate with us with almost no fear on their part. We also use it to have our visitors tell stories. This is one that my daughter made.
Water waves, seaweed swish, fishy swim, dippers like each other.
So that is sort of a shameless plug for my daughter. But I brought it because she's a 4-year-old, and she made that vine. I made the stuff, so she's not actually, some kind of amazing protege. But she made that. She was able to do that. I could show a 4-year-old how to do it. I admit she has repeated experiences with me, but we've done it with other students who come to our programs. Anybody of any age, and sometimes younger people have a better proclivity to this because they're less scared. And I think I'm about to turn it over to Patty, but the last thing I would say is that She'll talk more about this, but this is from our family, one of our family events. We set up, oftentimes, we think about when we use Vine, and she'll talk more about this, how much should a staff member intercede in people's lives in creating Vines? And we've had success with having a lot of intervention. So we created all of the props. The backdrop, I had a student from the RISD's, the Brown RISD Joint Program, so she painted that backdrop. It is one of our paintings. And she created this whole sort of setup about people stepping into a painting and what would happen if you did that. And people got playful really quickly. Vine invites humor and joy in a way that other kinds of museum interpretations sometimes don't. And you feel like, hey, everyone's vining. And if you look at the vast amount of vines out there, these are really good. The things that visitors make can immediately be as good as almost half of the vines that are out there. And so that kind of level of kind of easy success is very inviting to people. And so I think that's a good place to turn it over.
All right, thanks. My name is Patty Edmonson. I'm also at the Cleveland Museum of Art. And part of my job is to work with college students and teens, and so I'm going to talk a little bit about using Vine with them. And I'm in a stage where I've been using it for almost a year with them, and I'm doing it kind of experimentally. So Seema talked about intervention, and so I'm thinking about, are prompts helping or hurting? How much intervention do I give? So I have two that an intern of mine made, and that's not him, that's a friend of his. And he's a grad student, and his degree is in public history, and he actually didn't have any art museum experience when he came to me. And so I didn't give him any direction other than, I want you to get to know the museum, so just go into the galleries and make some vines, please. And so he often would call his friend over. And so for him, in that way, it did become kind of a social experience to just kind of play with his friend. And he did get to know the galleries a lot better. And where's my cursor? And so this vine even shows that he happened to be looking at this painting enough to realize that we had a vase that was exactly like this sort of, it's a Portland vase reproduction. So I just threw that in because to me that showed that he spent enough time in the galleries that he started to notice new things. Okay. And he started to sort of take ownership of the museum, I felt like. So now I'm going to jump to the teens. And just to preface, I guess, I work with 10 teenagers, and they're at the museum for a year, and I spend 2 weeks with them, and Seema does as well, all day, and then they come back once a month to volunteer. And so they make a range of video projects. They do we're going to do flip cam things. They work with a production company, but then I also ask them to make vines, and they have their own Vine account. And so at first, I was kind of learning with them when we started last year. And so this is one that we made together. I'm in there somewhere. And this was okay, but it was really like my idea, and I said, let's just make this right now. And it wasn't about them. And so then I gave them a list of prompts and sent them out into the galleries. And this is an example of what I thought was sort of unsuccessful. And I said, just go make a vine in Gallery 1. And this is what they made, which is fine, but not that interesting and not really about them either. And so as the program progressed, we're starting the second year now. One of my main goals is really to get their voice at the museum, and I think as we work more with Vine, that's a way for them to do that. Sometimes people at museums, people who work at museums are a little nervous about working with teenagers because they don't know what's going to happen. So I will say that I do sometimes delete vines that they make, but we always have a conversation about why I'm doing that. So I didn't delete this one. But we did talk about, the tone of the sort of caption that's under there. I mean, if you're reading it, maybe you're not hearing "ladies, please," and some people might consider that a little disrespectful of the art. So it's not that it's not that there's breasts in this. It's that there's a tone of respecting the art in the museum. So, for example, one that I've deleted in their feed is where they sort of mimed punching sculptures. And we talked about how that wasn't really okay and why. And then here are a couple examples of where I just let them go free and make what they wanted. And I think that's when we really started to find some humorous things. So if any of you have seen Ferris Bueller's Day Off, they kind of recreated a scene from that movie. And then I have another one.
Miley Cyrus, Joe Jonas, Paul Giamatti, Zoe Deschanel, Iron Man. Miley Cyrus, Joe Jonas, Paul Giamatti, Zoe Deschanel, Iron Man.
Okay, so that's their celebrity look-alike Vine, which I thought was kind of cute. And then we have kind of the other end of the spectrum. I've really found that some of my teens who have trouble expressing themselves verbally sometimes have made some of the best Vines. So this is one of our students, Fiona, and she created this one, and then this one, which I think, part of the pleasure of Vine is just creating something visually appealing. It's that simple. And so I thought these were both really cool, and I was really happy to see that she was able to excel in this. So I kind of played to her visual strengths there. So I think that's our last one, cool. Which is good because now we can make some vines.
Yes. So I had one really good question that I want to answer, and then I think we can maybe have a couple of questions and then break into doing, unless nobody has questions, then we could just do. Somebody had a very good question about ghosting. I know who it is. Dana, in fact. I'll call her out. And let me go back to that Vine. So Vine can be just straight 6 seconds of video, but most often it's about compressing time. And sometimes it's a very complicated stop motion, like the one that I did about paper making. Sometimes it's a little bit shorter, like this one where I'm making a felt bow. If you want to do stop motion animation and you want the image to line up, and so there's some people who are extraordinary at it, and you don't even notice that it moves, it just looks like it's going like... some of mine are more successful. I'm trying to think of one that maybe is a little bit... You can sort of see this, where this is not the best, but you can see that it kind of goes where the beads just keep appearing. What I've actually done is I've stopped the frame. So each of those is a single frame. And then I use a feature which creates a ghost of my previous frame. And the ghost remains, and it's a ghost because it's there. And you can see my hand is ghosted. You can see almost my hand. And that's so that you can line up your frames. This is the most important feature of making stop motion animation. I would never be able to do it otherwise, because it tells you where you're going. And I would say try as hard as you can, like not to breathe if you're doing something very complicated. Just don't wear swishy clothes. Don't roll around. Don't do anything that would move your camera, because it's very hard to get it back into place. So are there other burning questions? Yes.
Are any of you using Vine in the galleries as part of the movie on an iPad, or is it all digital and off-site?
So, Patty? Yours are all in the galleries.
Yeah. I mean, with the teens, almost everything they do is in the galleries.
Displayed.
Displayed.
I'm sorry, are you displaying
Yeah.
Vine video?
I think
Vines that
institutionally we're not there yet.
I think so. Patty's right. Institutionally, we don't display vines, but I also don't know that that's what they're for. I think vines are often best enjoyed, and this is why we had such a hard time with our presentation. We were sort of killing ourselves all day. They're so wonderful on your phones, and so we've been thinking of them as one way one person can communicate with another person, or the institution sort of can act as a person and communicate in that way. So we have not. It's a good question.
I was just thinking, with the behind the scenes and things
Yeah.
like that could be really interesting in gallery interpretation. I was just curious if anybody...
Especially for before an installation, putting it right up, as it's happening, you could be building building vines. Yeah, absolutely. It could be very interesting. Yes.
Why Vine over Instagram?
We were wondering if somebody was going to ask us this. We actually took a bet on it. I really like the framework of Vine. It was the first one I used. So we started this before Instagram, video in some ways. And so I don't like, as I've said, Alli knows I say this all the time, I don't like change. But what I actually, in truth, one of the things we've all talked about is Vine has some really great features like edit and ghost. And we don't really care that much about Instagram's filters that the video offers. And so even though, and then finally, 6 seconds actually is a lot in some ways. And so we started trying Instagram video, and it actually was an onerous amount of time. Do my co-panelists have other things to add about Instagram video?
I mean, I'll say one quick
That's live.
I have made partnering with our social media person at the museum sort of a how-to Instagram video, and that was okay. It obviously gave us a lot more time, but for any stop-motion animation, the Instagram platform is like, it's just not as smooth, and I can't exactly explain why, but the product is never as smooth as a Vine.
So maybe one last question that we should make. Oh, sorry, Alli, please keep going.
I was going to say I find the Instagram interface is far less responsive. There seems to be a slight lag between when you hit record or whatever it is you use for record in Instagram and then making your motion. There's a real lag, and that takes all the flow out of the recording process. And I realised how dependent I am on that bodily connection, instant responsiveness of Vine.
Right, any last questions? Yes.
For the times you used Vine with your visitors, that one with the painting and
Yep.
one, were they actually operating the app, or did you do that piece and they were just in the space?
It's a good question, which I glossed over. So recently we had something where they could use their own devices, and they could or couldn't, and I didn't care if you did or not. It's with our Van Gogh exhibition, and Patty had the one where her own students were doing it, and I suspect most people just took still images. With the other one, we had interns, these really great students who were interested in museum education, and so they helped facilitate. But it is, for some people, challenging. It's nice because family days, you don't sign up, you don't want to be there all day, your kids are crying. We'd like to have staff as intercessors. All right, so to break up to do Vine, Alli is going to be in the corner over near that beautiful chandelier, somewhere over there, and she's going to do an activity about funny faces. In particular, if you're thinking about doing Vine with people, it's a great thing to break the ice. Then somewhere over here, where there's some empty chairs, Chad will be over there, and Chad will be talking about Vine as well. He's a master of the tap, and the tap is really hard. You might not think that's true, but it really is. He also does a really good job of doing videos that sort of capture the spaces that you're in, the places that you're in, sort of atmospheric Vine. So if you want to do that, go over there. Patty's going to take over the whole table, and she's going to make little tiny books. Can you hold it up, Patty? Because I can't climb over this. And you can even use the paper that we made in the paper-making Vine. You can cut it up to make little books if you'd like. And then I'm going to be over there somewhere. And I'll be making Vines where one of the things that I have had to experience quite a lot is working with people who might not know how to use Vine and getting them to tell something that's like a story within 6 seconds. All right? So,
I'm doing texture, too.
Oh, yeah. And Patty, also, if you would like to Vine an idea, Patty's also would be happy to help you Vine the idea texture. All right, break. And you can just ask us questions, hang out with us, eat some of our candy from the pedestal.